12, Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question's for the Minister of Housing. Will New Zealand return to its historic average levels of house prices to incomes and house prices to rents under his government's housing policies? If so, how long will it take for this to occur?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the ratio of national household income to house price deteriorated from 4.8 to 6.3 between 2000 and 2008, but has improved under this government to 5.5. That is, it got 24% worse under Labor and has improved by 15% under National. This would suggest it would take about 12 years to reverse the damage of the previous government in respect to housing affordability and to get back to 2000 levels. The reason I have confidence that the government's housing policies will improve affordability is because they're based on the comprehensive report from the Productivity Commission. The new house build rate has increased from 14,000 houses per year to 24,000 houses a year, and new initiatives like the Housing Accords are freeing up land at the fastest rate in decades.
Supplementary, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Does he agree with the Reserve Bank's view that a rise in annual net migration to 45,200 by mid-2015 under current policy settings would force annual house price inflation up by 4 percentage points and force the bank to raise interest rates by as much as a further 55 basis points or 0.5%? And if so, will this make it harder or easier for Kiwi families to get into their own home?
Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, there is some relationship between migration and the overall demands on housing levels, and that's reflected in the latest OECD housing data that shows that the most affordable houses in the world are in Greece because everybody's leaving it, and that makes them very affordable housing, but that's not quite the economic plan of this government, but I do understand members opposite are quite keen on the Greece approach.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Has he seen new research showing that the average New Zealand house price rose by $98 a day over the past year, by $289 a day in parts of Auckland, with the average price in Auckland City now $842,000 according to QV? And what is he doing to ensure that Kiwi first home buyers can save at the rate of $100 a day or $300 a day in Auckland, with interest rates heading north of 8% because of his failed housing policies?
Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, the official data shows that house prices nationally over the last year have increased by 9%. I note that during the previous government, house prices increased in a single year by 28%, and Labor members insisted that that was not a problem and did absolutely nothing. In contrast, this government has a very wide program of freeing up land supply, dealing with issues of building materials costs, bills before the House to deal with those big increase in infrastructure costs that occurred with failed legislation from the previous government, and that's why I've got confidence in this government's housing affordability agenda.
Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Does the 39,000 new affordable homes he's promised Auckland include the 700 to 800 affordable homes the Auckland Council says will actually result from his promise? And how will he make up the shortfall between his promise and the actual number of affordable homes needed in Auckland for people to live in?
Mr Speaker.
Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr Speaker, I note that the increase in the issuing of building consents in Auckland in the last quarter is the fastest rate of increase in new house build for 12 years. The fastest rate of increase in 14 years, that we now have 24,000 houses a year being built, a good number of those in Auckland, a direct consequence of this government's measures through the Housing Accord and other measures to both increase supply and affordability.
Speaker.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Rather than blaming councils for holding back affordability, why doesn't he implement a national policy statement on affordable housing under the RMA, or split out the government's housing affordability provisions in its RMA reforms so that they can be passed before the election? Or would he rather just continue to blame other people for his failed housing policy?
Speaker.
Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, I'm actually encouraged by the member's question, because for 10 years Labor has denied there's any connection between the RMA and housing affordability. That's right. But the key problem is this. Labor's saying the answer is a national policy statement on housing affordability under the RMA. But the advice from officials is you can't do a national policy statement on housing affordability unless you amend Part 2 of the RMA, something members on this side of the House want to get on and do, and members opposite have opposed at every step of the way.
That concludes questions for oral answer. Order. Order. Honourable members, I have received letters from the Right Honourable Winston Peters and Honourable David Cunliffe seeking to debate under Standing Order 386 the decision of the Auckland High Court in relation to charges that Honourable John Banks filed a false electoral return, his subsequent resignation